Get up, get ready, it's time to be woke. Take off your shades, it helps see through the smoke. Cause the wicked hide behind the cloak. And if you stay in the mist, you gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog. What's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the fact.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy. It is Monday morning in Canada. It's a holiday Monday because the last full weekend, usually I think it is in May, is Queen Victoria's birthday. And it just means we're not actually celebrating that. We're just celebrating that Monday is a holiday. So it's a quiet day here in Canada, but apparently things go on in other places in the world, including where my lovely and talented co-host lives, Miss Carrie Barber. Good morning, Carrie.
Good morning, Andy. Good morning, everybody. And I just want to, I just want to let everybody know. Just let me preempt this. I'm tired. I'm crabby, and I'm sore. So if Amber's tuning in, I haven't seen her pop on yet, but just bear with me. So you're gonna get the unfiltered, unfettered view this morning. So there's that.
So do you want me to translate then?
Yeah, you can be my friendly translator this morning.
Okay. All right.
Because
I'll frame it. I'll be your spin doctor.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So first up this morning, there was a lot going on, a lot this weekend. And shout out to Mike Patino. He's one of our advisors and sponsors. This guy is just a phenomenal organizer, and he put together an event, Medicare for All rally. And I thought the venue was kind of appropriate. So if you're in Chicago, it's part of Chicagoland, not necessarily in the city proper, but part of it. Westfield Mall used to be the largest mall in the United States until Mall of America was built. So it was a really good backdrop of capitalism for this Medicare for All rally. And it had a really good turnout. So if you missed that in the Chicagoland suburbs, I am sure that there will be more coming because it's something that affects Chicago uniquely because you have Blue Cross Blue Shield is dominant there. And I recall we had in Illinois, there was a kind of a hybrid nonprofit insurance company that was like the next step getting towards Medicare for All. So they control their prices, they control their profits, all of these sort of things. It was called Land of Lincoln, and they were doing phenomenal things. And it was killed by Blue Cross Blue Shield, anti-competition. So it was a good event, and so proud of Mike for putting that together. And if you were able to attend that, good on you. One of the congressional members that they were particularly targeting, because this was his district, his name is Raja Krishnamurthy. He ran as a progressive, but I guess it's more like a Pelosi progressive. He's part of the Progressive Caucus. Not necessarily supportive of Medicare for All in that he's not going to do anything at all to put it forward. So today is like day 68 that HR 1976 Medicare for All from Pramila Jayapal was introduced. Yes. And it's sitting there collecting dust. Nothing's happened. No movement, no schedule, no hearing, no nothing. Oh, performative. So
that was a lovely song.
That is the best I can do on my singing voice. It's important. It should be important to everybody. Kudos and shout out to Mike Patino for organizing that, getting the awareness, getting people together to see that I'm not alone in this. There's so many people who want this, and that's part of what we are going to talk about in the larger show segment, kind of a recap of the U.S. Solutions Summit The other quick mention, and I put a link in the chat, is there's a ceasefire for Israel. However, they're violating it left and right. And one of the journalists that I follow was recently on Democracy Now, and he was going through exactly what's happening, right? So maybe they're not dropping bombs, but they're still shooting people in the head. They're still terrorizing people. So that's not exactly a ceasefire. And you need to know about it. So if you will please raise your voice, share your social media content with the Palestinian journalists who are trying to get the word out there, keep the information going. That would be a huge, tremendous help. Yeah, so then the other part of this tragedy in London, there was an activist who's part of an organized political party and a movement. She was a Black Lives Matter activist. She was out there supporting autonomy for Palestinians and an end to genocide. Her name was Sasha. This was an interesting story and is still developing. This came out of The Guardian. She was shot in the head on Sunday morning, and she's in critical condition right now. So her political party and friends and family obviously are asking for your prayers and support. What I thought was interesting is the South London police said that they didn't think it was related to her political activity. And here's the problem. This group had gotten credible threats of harm and all of these things that they had reported. Meanwhile, the South London police are saying that they think it's unrelated. So
yeah, we could call bullshit on that, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, so those are my big ones for the recap before we get into the main event. Andy, you got anything that you want to share?
No, let's get started. We've got a lot to cover.
Okay, so for those of you who missed the U.S. Solutions Summit, and I'm going to say there were a lot of you, so I did post the link to it, and this is on KRTD Media. So shout out to that entire team. I know they've been working extraordinarily hard to plan this, to get people together, to promote it. And I thought that there were some really good things in it, some things that I think need to change. So hold on. I have Shane Coughlin texting me right now while we're in the middle of the show. So
is it a cease and desist order?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So we are not streaming to their YouTube. And okay, so okay. So Shane, so if you're watching right now, we're in the middle of a live show. And when you text me, you come up because you're on my super duper list. So that's why, yeah. So a cameo appearance by Shane Coughlin.
I didn't know you had a super duper list.
I do. Andy, you're top of that list.
Of course.
Of course.
So, of course. That doesn't need to be said.
Yeah.
Goes without saying.
Exactly. Yeah. See, Andy's on the top of everybody's list, which is why Andy ended up doing 3 segments. Two. No, was I 2? Just 2?
I was only supposed to do 1, and I ended up doing 2.
Oh, okay, 2.
I did segment 3, and then filled in for Reef for segment 5.
Maybe that's what it was. Segment 3 stuck in my head, so it's just the number 3. That's all I got. I'm holding on to fragments of memory at this morning. So hey, good morning, Amber. She says, "Good morning, my lovelies." Isn't she just?
Of course she does.
She's wonderful.
Yes, lovely, and grumpy.
I'm the grumpy one this morning.
I know I'm the lovely one today.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah,
there you go.
I'm still basking in the glory of my not embarrassing myself moment on Saturday. So,
Yeah, I thought you did a good job. I thought you did. My only critique of you, and I am certainly open to many critiques on my performance, but I wondered, 3, you had a good pace. The cadence was great. Your questions were well thought out. The only difference was in this one where you were brought in, unplanned. So first, you didn't have the prep time, which we put in a lot of work here. So there's a lot of work that goes behind the scenes. So kudos to you for stepping in. But you were a lot slower, and I was like, has he started tequila? Is
No,
that?
no, 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 no. Well, what happened was I didn't really even pay attention to the other ones because I was trying to concentrate on preparing for mine, and I just thought I was watching the other ones. Well, number 5 came up. I knew nothing about it. Can you step in? Sure. Well, what's it about? Oh, well, you're fine. You know about everything. It's like,
Well, see, everybody just assumes Andy's got it.
well, yeah, but at least want to think about it for a few seconds before. And okay, who are the guests? Okay, who's that guy? Okay, how do you pronounce that name? Okay, so I'm typing all of this in so I could have a cheat sheet beside my feed to the Zoom call, and I haven't been around the activism, I mean, especially the American one, for that long. And most of my stuff, as I admit, has been on the editing side, on the behind the scenes side. It's was very rarely even anything to do with being in front of a camera. So this is really the first time that I've had the opportunity to do this. And it's like, okay, well, that's the difference between the starting pitcher and the relief pitcher, I guess. The starting pitcher has a routine they go through during the day. They warm up, take a long time, long toss, move together, get ready for the game, and then you go out and do it, right? Whereas the relief pitcher is like, hey, you're in, right? Can I warm up a little? So it was interesting, and I know of the guys. I've never had a conversation with any of them, so it was almost like, "Hi, I'm Andy. I'm an empty Canadian cup. Can you fill me?" Right. So, but and I thought it went okay, but a lot of the times, you second guess yourself when you say, "Okay, make sure I call that person by their correct name." Okay, so So it was what it was, but I filled it.
No, I thought you did good. The questions were very thought out. I think it just goes to show that so when you're doing it right, it looks flawless, and it's a piece of cake. So anybody could just turn on a camera and jump. But I don't think people realize the amount of work that goes into it, the research, and like you said, who are these people? What kind of questions can you ask that are thoughtful? What will the audience find compelling? All of those things. And if you're just thrown in, no, it doesn't work. So
well, and the other thing was in my first panel with the Shahid and Dan and Brent, I had told them, I said, this is basically the layout. I will just lead you into stuff what you want to talk about, and they all kind of stuck to the program where I was asking them specific questions and they were sharing, right? The other one, I didn't get a chance to talk to the guys beforehand. I really didn't even know what I was going to ask, as I was basically just flying by the seat of my pants. And I had no idea that Franco, my first guest who started speaking right off the top, was going to go into a prepared statement that was going to go on for a while, which was completely contrary to the way I thought it was going to run, right? So wasn't really sure what to do. But anyways, it ended up, it was fine, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. So Amber, your check's in the mail, girl. She says, you do an amazing job behind the scenes work, Andy, but you and Carrie do a fantastic job on screen. So yeah. We'll get your $5 check in the mail, basically. So Independent Left joins us this morning. Good morning. Mariano freaking Rivera. What does that mean?
Mariano freaking Rivera was probably the most renowned relief pitcher who had the world's greatest slider. And he could come into a game for the Yankees, and he could physically say to the batter, I'm throwing you the slider now, and then throw it, and then the batter would couldn't hit it. It was such a devastating ending the at bat pitch, and which made him a prolific relief pitcher, right?
Gotcha.
Okay. So that's what it's meant.
Okay, gotcha. So it's a baseball reference. Not gonna get it. So Indy also says, we were hoping for more of a conversation too, but everyone was amazing. Right. And that, I think, Eddie says that Andy was the greatest ever. See,
Who said that? Who
that
said
was
that?
Independent Laughs.
All right. So at the end of the show, there will be references for mental health support in the description.
Exactly. So that was, I think that was my biggest critique, right? Of, or I would say gentle criticism. I have a couple, but one of them was some of the conversation, some of the questions to me were so compelling, and then to hear the answers come out, I wanted to hear more on that. But there was just, like my segment had, we kind of got stuck on two questions and never got to the third one, which I do want to cover today, because I think all of the people that were featured in the rest of the panels, some of the content that we didn't get to absolutely affects them. I mean, criminal charges can be brought against you because of HR1. And I want to get into that in just a little bit. But how many people know that? And the reason I know it was because it was assigned to me in the first segment. So I had to go out and read the entire text of the bill. This is HR1 that just passed. It's now law. And I didn't get to cover it because one of the first two questions required kind of a deeper dive in a conversation. And then the panelists that I was on with were just amazing. So there was just almost too little time, but then you got to cap it somewhere, right? You don't want to have people sitting up there for 6 hours talking about one subject, even though you could. So Indy says, we weren't sure how long to make the segments, but we will learn. No, and this was okay. So for people who didn't catch it, there has never been an event like this. So this is why I say it's a gentle criticism, because it is a learning process. What works, what doesn't work, what worked well, how can you expand on it, that sort of thing. So absolutely, it's meant in kindness.
Right. And there was, let's not forget that this is the first time really that they've used this platform in this environment, and they had practiced with it the day before in interviewing some of the hosts that hadn't been at that point, and Howie Hawkins. And so they had used that system the day before, and it worked flawlessly. There wasn't any problem. So there was no reason to believe that there was going to be any technical issues when they started off. And it just, the way that Reef described it was that nothing was behaving the way it was supposed to, and nobody could figure out why. And then finally, by my first panel, it seemed like the bugs had been and the gremlins had been removed, and then it went pretty seamlessly the rest of it. But that's the growing pains of starting a new event, right? Like whether it's technical issues virtually, like what we were doing, or organizing people and how long they're going to speak in person at like a rally or something. If you're doing it for the first time, you can't anticipate problems you haven't seen before. Right.
Oh, absolutely. And I was watching it from the perspective of, in a formal life, I was doing live broadcasts on a global scale for multinational corporations, right? So these are companies with seemingly unlimited budgets, and you had to use this technology. And we were doing flooded downloads across a private network. And we had all of these tools and resources, and I had a checklist of 35 things. It had to be flawless, and I was doing the directing and working with the vendors and all of this sort of thing. And no matter what, every time something would go wrong, including I have the CEO standing up there getting ready to talk, and now I got a goose on the other side of the window honking at him, right? So absolutely anything and everything will go wrong, and it's one of those things where you just gotta anticipate you roll with it, because something is always going to go wrong, always. And like I went through all of the tech and security and all of this, I didn't count on a goose, right? So it's just one of those things, and I think people need to be respectful of that, because that's an example of a global corporation here is volunteers in a very, very small network. So I think that kudos, the planning and testing and everything they did. I'm happy with it, and I think that part of it really came through. And yeah, Amber, the show must go on. So real quick for my segment, I think this is important. And okay, so here's where I'm gonna diss a little bit of tea, and Andy has already admonished me. It's not what you say, but how you say it. So let me clean it. One of the things that I saw in relating to our fellow journalists is not the right word.
Commentary experts.
Thank you, commentary experts, because there is a difference between journalism and commentary experts.
Right.
Okay.
And it's kind of sort of like the trade-off that we do. I would consider you a journalist and myself a commentary.
Right. So, and it's a different structure, different mission, different focus, right? So, I think that is an opportunity that we have, particularly in the left space. In fact, I didn't even consider us left. We're, here's facts, and here it is. We just happen to adhere to progressive policy because makes sense, right? So there was a lot of opinion that I saw not necessarily backed up by evidence and fact that made, as a journalist, made me cringe just a little bit. And one of the pieces that I really think that everybody in those panels, it's going to sound ridiculous when I say, boy, I wish they watched our show, but I really wish they watched our show, because I think we're coming into a scenario now where all of those people that I saw on the panel are about to risk criminal charges if they're not more careful about how and what they say. And this is part of what we do here. We are not only teaching basic civics, the law, and all of these things here, economics, all of these things. By the way, we got Dr. Kabook coming up Wednesday, so tune in for that. So this is what we do. We present the educational piece, not just for the layperson, the activist, the casual observer, but also for our colleagues, because I don't see that happening. And this is where I really wanted to get into some of the provisions on HR 1 that was part of my panel, but we just ran out of time. So if you haven't read this bill, I put the link in the chat, and I'll do it again. It's a boring read. I'm not gonna lie. It's a boring read until you get to the section that affects punditry and journalists, because it's now criminal. So they took provisions of free speech and slap lawsuits that are already in place regarding the law, and then they expanded it into this section called false statements regarding federal elections. And this is something I hadn't seen. And when I read it, I went, holy shit. So pay attention to this. So I just posted that link. It's subtitle D as in dog, prohibiting deceptive practices and preventing voter intimidation, right? So for those of you who aren't familiar with it, we already have a law called the Hatch Act of 1939. And what that said is, during an election, an official cannot come right out and say blah, 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 and influence an election. We had a very clear violation of the Hatch Act during the 2016 episode with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. Very clear, and nothing has happened. And I'm still to this point going, what? It just blows my mind. So the moment that I'm talking about in particular is when you had the former director of the FBI, James Comey, admit on national TV that there was an open investigation of Hillary Rodham Clinton in the FBI. They were working on it. That right there was a violation of the Hatch Act. And why was it a violation? Number one, because he mentioned there's an open investigation and he wasn't supposed to during a federal election cycle. And two, he neglected to mention that they also had open investigations of the other candidate, Donald Trump. That's a very clear violation. And the fact that Comey is walking around free to this day just blows my mind. So the Hatch Act is very clear about what you can and cannot do. And that is not just for elected officials. That's also supposed to be for journalists and pundits too, right? You can't, the Pizzagate thing. Anybody who was talking about Pizzagate and not using the words may or alleged, that's a violation. So under HR 1, they go even further. So this is why I'm calling your attention to this subtitle D under false statements. False statements regarding federal election is language that has criminalized specific statements or endorsements. So if you're talking about a race at a federal level, this is your Senate, your US House, president, all of these sort of things at a federal level, you better be extraordinarily careful about what you say and how you say it. And in this country, we've seen that even as a journalist, I'm not necessarily protected by free speech rights anymore, right? So anybody on the left, and this is the other part that I saw, they were very upset about platforms demonetizing them. And to this, I just got to say, what did you expect was going to happen, right? Did you think that the oligarchs were just going to roll over and let you have this? No. This is why I think we need to be smarter about what we say and how we put it out there, right? So I'm never going to fault somebody for trying to earn money, like Brooklyn Dad. I have no problem with him getting paid to be a political pundit. I just wish he'd be a little more upfront with it, right? Just let us know.
And did we forget that Michael Bloomberg spent $1 billion of his own dollars in advertising to run for president for, what was it, 12 days?
Yeah, exactly.
In order to curtail a lot of the momentum that Bernie was building, right?
Mm-hmm.
They thought the whole thing was just to stop Bernie. He had no intention of going any further than when they anointed Biden as the choice to in South Carolina, right? That the whole thing happened because of him.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Joe Turay joined us this morning. Good morning, Joe. Yeah, Joe is phenomenal. If you missed our interview with Joe earlier, it was about what is absolutely, in my opinion, an antitrust violation with Aetna in Kansas. We're seeing these same types of lawsuits, and in fact, she sent me an article where Kansas is considering antitrust lawsuits against Aetna. So kudos, Joe. Thank you for your advocacy in that area. And then Mike Toller. Mike Toller's late. What
happened?
I don't know.
We're on the same time every day, Mike.
It's a Monday, so he says, "Hey, good morning." And then Mike just posted the chilling effect reference. It's a legal reference about political free speech and things like that. So if I think in this case, whereas me as a journalist, I have more risk than like Andy would as a pundit.
Right.
So even though you're Canadian, let's presuppose you're in the US. Well, okay. I don't know. The US is going after foreign journalists now and all of that. So maybe you're at risk. But the chilling effect clause gives you some more protection. So thank you, Mike, for putting that in there. So this is the part that I really wanted to get to on my segment, and we couldn't because, oh, by the way, everyone else and the rest of it, you are now going to be subject to this. So it goes back to, we can't protest on the Supreme Court steps anymore, even though that's part of the Constitution. Who's going to challenge it, right? Journalism and free speech, not so much anymore. So we see the constant eroding of our rights, not only on a professional level, but on a citizen level. And here's HR 1. Did anyone mention this when they talked about it? No, they talked about, yay, voter stuff. And there is some pretty cool voter stuff in there. And one of them is, I thought was kind of interesting, is a pilot program for junior high students There's a grant. There are $25,000 to schools to give them ballots, sample ballots, and rekindle an interest in civics. So I thought that was kind of cool. But nobody's talking about the totality of what was in this bill that is now law. So I wanted to bring that up, particularly for our colleagues on left, right, and center. Be careful. So if you were complaining about them demonetizing you on a platform, wait till you see what's coming next, right? So
exactly.
Yeah, get your retainer fees in order now. So Indie Left says that's one thing we've been talking about, criminalizing protests as part of HR 1. So it's not just protests, Indy. This is presentations like the one you're watching now. I have to be extraordinarily careful about what I say out of federal elections. State elections, they don't give a shit. It's federal because that's where the big money is, right? And I don't mean, pays and all of that. I mean, in an election cycle, billions is spent in marketing. So don't touch that. Don't interfere with any of that, because I'm not going to criticize campaign workers. But from the marketing standpoint, the sheer volume that happens, it relies on that horse race, and that is advertising at the corporate-owned networks all the way through to, the primaries and those debates and things. So, yeah, that's a big part of it. So.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So shall I keep complaining, or do you want to jump in?
Well, I was going to, mention that I think that the biggest thing, and you're alluding to it too, right? That as long as this was going, right? And it was if you were involved with it, certainly the guys that were running it, Reef and Indy and those guys, it was a long haul for them, especially with the technical issues at the beginning. But this just goes to show you how many issues that we have to deal with, right? That all of these topics, and nobody really had any time to do anything other than just scratch the surface on this. But that just shows you what we're really up against and all of these things that we had to talk about. But one thing that kind of stood out to me after, when I was thinking about the whole layout of it, is that, there's a lot of different ways that people have been introduced into how we're going to fix things and how we're going to make things better and that kind of thing. And I just wanted people to realize that when you think in terms of, like, the perfect example is the UBI, right? People calling for the universal basic income. When you look at everything that's wrong with, the problems that the pandemic's brought to light, and medical debt and student debt and this and that and everything else that's going on, that a simple cash payment to people is not going to fix anything, right? It's not going to help society in any way, right? It's the fundamental shift in society that, to a more just society, that is what's going to be responsible. And throwing a few bucks at people to give back to the capitalists isn't going to do anything for, the environment or the people in general, right? I think so. That's something that people have to get their heads around, that there's some great progressive policies, but there's also some bad ones, and the ones that are floated out there as these, saviors of the planet, like Bitcoin, right? When they're just,
oh my God,
they're just Trojan horses, and they're not going to do anything at all except enrich more rich people, right?
That was the other cringy moment. But we talked about that last week, right? So in a prime example, you had the stimulus check go out to homeowners and whatever else. And if you were one of those homeowners who started to find yourself underwater because of, pandemic and the shit show that happened, and you refinance, coincidentally, you were charged $1,400, and that went right back to the banks, right? So same scenario happens with a UBI when you don't have the floor set in place to actually help people. You just become a pass through for the Treasury to hand it back to, I don't know, Wells Fargo, Chase, or whatever. So,
Yeah,
and that
exactly.
and that was, thank you for bringing up the Bitcoin thing, because I know that there are a number of people who are very happy with their Bitcoin trading and all of this sort of thing, not realizing the implications on a macro level of what would happen if they actually achieve their goals, right? That means this Jeff Bezos person or Jamie Dimon, you are handing everything to them in your pursuit of this digital currency.
Yes.
That I'm like, no, every time I heard that,
Right.
and who was it? Christina Tobin said it several times. And then there were a couple other panelists who said it, and I'm like, oh my God, no.
Yeah, and then
No.
people are willing to put their faith in this without even knowing what it is, right? Like
Yeah.
thinking that this is a monetary system that's going to save the planet. Well, no, it's not. It's a
Mhm.
commodity, like whatever, like orange juice. It has more in common with your Starbucks card than it does with anything else, right? And so it's
Mhm.
not going to do anything. And when you educate yourself about macroeconomics and understand how the federal government finances the economy, then you realize that Bitcoin is just another tool of the rich to make more money, and that's basically it. And if there was any doubt that this isn't a monetary system, right? If you look at the value of it and what those units of Bitcoin actually can buy you, you realize that there's some thing like a 64% hyperinflation rate that's happened in the last little while, right?
Mhm.
That's the thing that everybody screams about, that we can't have happen to the dollar, and it's not going to because of the way that it works. But all of the things that they scream about, we can't do this because of inflation. Well, there's your example, right?
Right, exactly. Okay, so two comments came in, and first off, I know that I'm not being objective, but we have the smartest fucking audience ever. And I think I love it because it challenges us to do better and surprise them with educational pieces. But then every time they come back with these comments, and I'm like, damn it, you guys are so smart. So Mike says the UBI without other reform is not a pyramid scheme, it's a reverse funnel. So super snarky and right on. Thank you, Mike. Loved it. And then Amber says, I see so many folks, even some MMTers, talking about taxes for the current inflationary episode, not realizing that first of all, it's supply shock, right? You sell that in wood as a commodity. Right now, if you check the price of lumber, I'm building a house, so I watch it daily, and it's shocking. She's right. So she says it's supply shock and a change in relative value, not inflation. And second, that taxes don't make goods and services appear. Thank you. Thank you, Amber. Yes.
Yes.
And
Well, that's
now,
the problem on the economics side. The UBI means the first word is universal, right?
hmm,
A basic income cannot be universal because it, by definition, by its essence, is an inflationary event, right? By just giving people more money to spend, well, they're ensuring that the things in the economy to absorb that spending, the goods and services are not there. Then you've got too much money chasing too many goods and services, and of course that drives the prices up, right? And so it's not a solution to anything, right?
yeah.
So that's so it can't be universal because you can't have to tax somebody to remove the extra money, that so that you're taking away the inflationary pressure, right? So anybody working class and above is going to lose that benefit through taxation, and then those people don't get a net benefit, so they don't care about it, and so they're not going to fight for it. And then the right, the people that don't want it, just say, look, see, it doesn't do anything, it's bad, let's get rid of it, and we're back to square one.
As they always do. So very predictable. Okay, so there are two more that I want to get to. And again, I don't know that I'm being objective in this next one because I ran for office. And it was first, if you are so focused on federal office, then you have bought and sold into the propaganda all the time because you are part of the model that got Trump elected because he was a reality show host, right? So you need to stop with the, I'm just gonna fucking run for Congress. No, you're not. Stop. Second, if your entire framework of electoral politics revolves around what happens at the federal level, then you haven't been paying attention. And I'm setting all of this up as another moment where, where you have those moments where you scream at the TV or the radio or whatever. Maybe that's just me. I know it's not just me. Other people do it. But
yeah,
this,
the vein, you can see the veins in your neck.
Yes. So I had that moment, right? And here's where I want to set up the example. So you had this great panel where you had Dan Whitfield, who is currently running for Senate, people. He's currently running for Senate right now. And then you had Shahid Buttar, and the third one,
Brent Welder.
Thank you.
Of Kansas City or Kansas.
Yeah,
ran in Kansas 3rd congressional district in 2018.
Okay, so you have these three candidates, and I gotta tell you, I don't know that there's a book that has been written about what actually goes on in campaigns and running for elections, and there should be, because and I've said it before, and I don't think it really gets through to people. It is a bloodless war, and sometimes blood is shed during these campaigns. So they come after you, your relationships, particularly if you're married or with a significant person. They come after your job. They come after your family. They come after your campaign staff. They come after everything to do with who you are, including and up to threatening your life, physical violence, all of these. And that's on a good day, right? Mm-hmm. So whenever you see, thank you, Amber, Brett Welder, whenever you see somebody who has run a race and they thank their spouse and they thank their family, there's a reason for it, because I have put you through such hell to get to where this is. Either we won or we lost or whatever. That that's a public apology in a way, and not every race is like that. But I haven't been doing this for very long, only 5-6 years, and I keep seeing it over and over and over, particularly in a race where you have a true progressive candidate. So I absolutely respect anybody who runs for office, whether it's library board, county board, your state office, and then God help you if you want to run for a federal office, right? So that to me was, those folks on there have my ultimate respect, because even the Shahid one, I was involved in helping to debunk the people who came out with sexual harassment allegations against him. And it didn't take me very long. In fact, his own campaign manager, former campaign manager, Jasper, I approached her as a journalist. I said, okay, you said X, Y, and Z. Here I have the proof by your own signature with your FEC filings that is not true. Would you care to comment? Right? And I recognize this as a potential for a DNC derailing operation using his own staffer to do it, because he was going up against Nancy Pelosi. Right? So this was one tiny facet of it. And then I also saw San Francisco with the organization out there, how they threw out their own bylaws and their own operation to, in 45 minutes, take the word of 3 people who said Shahid had done X, Y, and Z, didn't contact Shahid, didn't contact anything, didn't do an investigation, whatever, and came out with a formal statement to derail his campaign. That again, Independent says they did that to Alex Morris too, right? So in context of all of that, like in my little race, I was followed. I had people threaten my life, threaten my family, all of it. Hope my husband's not watching because he still doesn't know some of this stuff. But yeah, I this started my relationship with my local police department because I had to file police reports in case I did get shot. I wanted a paper trail, at least, right? So all of that. And then in the next segment, I'm trying to clean it, Amy. I'm trying. In the next segment, you had people who had never run for office, never volunteered for a campaign, never canvassed, never had any experience whatsoever talk about checking out of electoral politics. And so, in the context of what people actually have to go through, I was like, holy shit, how dare you? And then on the other side, you and I have talked about it before. It has to be a two-pronged approach. If you're out there protesting, they can ignore you. And this is where Dan Lupiker and Kit Cabello from Hard Lens reiterated that point. They can ignore you if you're only going to be out there parked in front of somebody's house for a week or a month. We got to keep doing it. But then on the other side is the legal framework. You have to have that. Absolutely
Yes.
have to have that. And if
Yes.
you don't have a progressive willing to run for office, then you have given the power over completely to the oligarchs. And it just drove me up a wall when I heard somebody say, and it wasn't just one, check out of electoral policy. And I'm like, no, that is not how you do it. So basically what you're saying is, if I show up and I vote, and I want to make sure that you end up in a concentration camp, you are saying that's okay. And as an oligarch, right, I want you to check out. I want you to be so frustrated that you are not going to participate. You're not going to go to a party meeting. You're not going to vote. You're not going to do any of that because you give me full autonomy and right for an authoritarian system. And that's how it works, right?
Yes.
So we have talked before about ballot referendums, binding and non-binding. I am just so frustrated that even our colleagues haven't bothered to look at that because it is the power of the person, of the civic engagement, when we recognize how much power we actually have and tap into it. That is when things really change. And I implore everyone who, if you're going to turn on your camera and you're going to, provide your opinion, more power to you. But if you're not trying to educate and empower the voter, then why are you doing this? If it's just for a paycheck, okay, great, got it. Be clear about that. But when you're telling people to check out and give up their power because you don't understand it, I have a problem with that. Absolutely have a problem. So there's my rant.
Have a breath. Have a breath.
I got one more. I got one more after it. So go ahead.
All right. No, I was going to say, and you and I have discussed this many times on this show and other places, that the way path forward for progressives is on every path that we can think of, right? That on a grassroots movement, on a protesting movement, on a direct action movement, but ultimately, because of the structure of the United States Constitution and other constitutions in other countries in the world, is that the solution has to be accepted by the government, by the politicians, in order to facilitate the changes, right? So it's not good enough for the people to just say, we demand power. You have to have the politicians in place to be the arbiters of that change, or you're just run the risk of being co-opted by the bad actors that are still currently politicians, right?
Absolutely.
And that's the biggest takeaway. If you think that AOC and the squad are completely gone to the dark side, they're all wearing masks now, they're all breathing with a right, they're all gone. Well, that's maybe true depending on your position or what you think, but if there are enough people like-minded that are in the squad or the Progressive Caucus or whatever, while you start to demand change, then your government allows that change to happen. Because if they don't, then it can't.
Yeah, so 2 points to that, right? So while I was watching this, and first off, Independent Left, he said nobody said that. That's not what they were saying at all. And I'm going to suggest that you go back and watch, particularly Frank Analysis said it multiple times. And then I wanted to make sure I understood it correctly. So I went out to his channel, and he has a video now where he's on the third point that he wanted to make. So he expanded on it. So I invite you to go check that out. And yes, absolutely, he said that. So I'm
Right.
not making it up.
No. And I think, let's just be clear here. We're not trying to, anger people here, or,
Yeah.
because we aren't trying to make coalitions within the left space. But let's make sure that we have the ability to, all of us, to grow when we talk and decide and discuss the actual issues, right? And that, okay, well, maybe didn't think of that aspect of it. That's a
Right.
good point, right? That's needs, because that's what's lacking in American politics right now is people are full cups. They're tribalized. They're a lot of them have their own talking points handed to them, and they're steadfast and unwilling to change. And you've got these two immovable forces staring everything down while nobody gets fed or nobody gets a house, right? So
Right. And I want to be clear, particularly for Independent Left, I do not ascribe malice to these particular comments. I think it's a lack of understanding, as you said, Andy, because nobody really knows unless they've been through electoral politics from the inside what happens. Or this is why I am constantly urging people to go be a poll watcher, because you can stop a lot of corruption by just sitting there. Go be an election judge. We had Mike on who will talk about, everybody has this idea of how elections actually work and votes get counted, and it's not how it works at all. And I think that is a lack of understanding, which is very different from trying to purposely obfuscate the facts. So I want to be clear on that one.
Right. And I agree. I recall, one of the first people we interviewed with the previous entity to which has kind of evolved to this now. But when we were interviewing Jason Eno about his, and he's genius about policy within the DNC committee space, right? Saying that you don't necessarily need to kick the people out. What you do is you read the documents and the rules that govern how all of this works, and you make the rule changes, and you fix the rule book, because everybody has to play by the rules. If you've changed the rules, then you tie the hands of the DNC that are only interested in promoting centrist policies and centrist candidates. But if you change those rules, they can't do that. And then you have a more free election. But the problem is, it's so that, especially that he was saying, it's so hard to organize people on 50 different state levels in order to do that. And ultimately that was the problem. But that was another avenue of attack that progressives could take, right? And a perfectly valid one.
Absolutely. So Adam, he's pushing back a little bit, and I get it. He says the idea was to explore if the left is more effective today using direct action or in electoral politics, where we keep getting steamrolled. I get that. I think that was a valid question and a good place to focus. I'm talking specifically to the particular opinions of some of the panelists, not necessarily how it was organized. So with this being said, for example, under the same HR 1, did anybody know that there was a mandate for every state to create a citizens oversight committee on redistricting to avoid gerrymandering? Did anyone know that was happening? And oh, by the way, the deadline to submit your interest to participate was May 21st? No? Okay, well, I knew, and I knew because I showed up at a party meeting and they said, hey, this is going on. Anyone want to volunteer for this committee? I said, sure, because I am disabled and our voices are very rarely heard. And there are too many times polling places on the second floor of a building with a staircase. And people who are able bodied, or whatever term you want, don't necessarily have to think that way. So I'm like, yeah, let me put my name in. So I am now in consideration with the state ethics board to be part of that organization in the state level. So when we talk about ending corruption and gerrymandering or whatever, this is part of why I say people in our space, either punditry or journalists, we need to do a better job of educating people, because this is one of those pieces in this piece of legislation. We only talked about the money aspect of it, HR1. We didn't talk about all of these other provisions. How many people watching that program would have loved to have been considered as part of the group that would decide how districts are formed after the census? That's huge. That's huge. And boy, does that go a long way to ending corruption and money in politics. But we didn't get to talk about that. We didn't get to talk about any of it. So, did I just lose Andy? I may have. All right. Well, keep going. See if Andy rejoins. So the other part of it that I really liked was there was a segment at the very last panel that I don't know if anyone else is got to watch, but Jimmy Dore said it, and he was talking about the cancel culture. And part of what I loved about that was we all talked about being caught in the cancel culture. You say one thing, people come after you, and Jimmy clarified on that point that I think was valid, and I absolutely agree with what he said. Is that it wasn't cancel culture so far as, you said a wrong thing or whatever. It was being able to expose and talk about the people who represent themselves of a political ideology, and then we find out they're not. So, for example, Brooklyn Dad. I have no problem with Brooklyn Dad's opinions and lauding DNC things. What I do have a problem with is if you're paid to do this, you should let somebody know, because we have laws about that. We have laws about lobbyists and things like that, and you become a paid lobbyist. So you should have to disclose that. And then to Jimmy's point, TYT and now The Intercept, right? So we have those two examples. I agree with him that that's not cancel culture. That is exposing the co-op. And I want to call back to Alan Howell, who calls them sheepdogs, right? That they are paid to funnel you to one of the corporate entities for a money-making power grab purpose. I think that's totally acceptable. Particularly here, we definitely want to make sure that people, like everybody here, push back on my opinion, push back on whatever. If I'm pulling out a fact and discussing it, then yeah, let's have a conversation, but you got to bring fact with fact. Now, if I am ever in a position where I am paid, as a campaign staffer, I'm going to let you know. It's going to be on all my profiles, all of that sort of thing. And I think that that's only fair. So I really appreciate Jimmy Dore saying that, to clarify it, because that's very, very different than the co-opting approach to cancel culture. Very different. And we saw it again with the Me Too movement and what's going on with corporate media. They always have to have a bad guy. And last week it was Rose McGowan. Next week it'll be somebody else. So I think there's a difference between that and actually holding people to account, because it happens, particularly if you are trying to draw a living off of doing this type of work in an independent space. It's tough. It's very tough. So you just got to know. So like here, if you are a Patreon donor, if you're one of our sponsors or your direct advertiser, we tell you up front, we appreciate it. We appreciate the support. However, you get absolutely no input on the stories that we cover, how we cover it, or what we're doing. And we want to make that clear to everybody. Not everybody can do that. So it's just, to me, it's the same thing as taking a member of Congress, and we always joke about having them have NASCAR patches, right? So the same thing has to happen with your media. And if you missed the segment that we did, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, the weeks run together, Andy and I did a segment on Operation Mockingbird 3.0 with corporate media, and showing how each media outlet is clearly defined by their ideology, left, right, center, whatever, but they don't ever disclose the corporate ownership. And now that you have just 5 companies owning newspaper, radio, and cable broadcasting, that's definitely a bias. And we understand that from the independent progressive standpoint, but yeah, I think that's accountability. So kudos to Dor for that, and some of the other pundits who reiterated that point. So since Annie's not here, I'm going to get to, hey, Subi's here. Hello, Subi. Subi, for those of you who don't know, this is, I'm having a fangirl moment. Subi is head of the New Latin Kings. And this is part of the reformed Rainbow Coalition. So if you missed the interview we did with Subi and the other national leaders of this Rainbow Coalition, very powerful stuff. So good morning, Subi. Thank you. Mike, who is an election judge, technical judge, is calling back to what we were talking about with elections. And he says, he's being snarky, which I love. He says, "Oh, come on, Carrie. You know that the most would not step up to be on the commission. Someone else will do it," is the rally cry. And that's absolutely right. It's easier to bitch about it than actually get up and do something. And then Mike says, "I point to voter turnout as proof." Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. Indy left. Both parties are corporate entities for money-making purposes too. True, absolutely. And they make no bones about it. They are literally organized as corporations. So at least they're honest about it. And this is one of the topics that we brought up about taking the primary elections out of corporate media, out of the for-profit space, telling the DNC Corporation and the RNC Corporation, and I'm not being snarky, they are literally corporations, telling them that they no longer have control over that because it is a civic action. They don't own the primaries, right? So you had Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer a couple of years ago on national TV laughing about rigging the primary because they own it. Well, they don't. It's run at a state level, and it is run through our state taxes, particularly your property taxes, finance all of that activity from your county commissioners, the voting, all of that. You fund that from your state taxes. So for them to say that they own it, not true. So this is part of where the power comes from, understanding your rights as a citizen, your obligations, and what you should expect. So when you're checking out of electoral politics, you lose all of that. And I really, really want you to reconsider your role in that. So what else we got? I'm sorry, so Subi. Yeah, I can hear you, Andy. Are you back? Oh, okay. I don't know. Oh yeah, they can hear you. They can hear you. So yeah, all right. So if anybody wants to donate to the cause, I got to get Andy a new computer now. So Subi corrected me, and I want to make sure I mention this. He says young lords, not young kings. Well, Subi, you guys are kings to me. So kings and queens. So thank you for that. And then Mike says CNN brought to you by Brondo. Brondo has electric lights. I love that. I love that movie, and I hate that it was predictive. Okay, so Joe is saying state legislatures in Kansas need a CanCare Insurance NASCAR jacket. Absolutely. And please go back and watch that interview with Joe, because I guarantee you, if it's happening in Kansas, it's happening everywhere. And party affiliation doesn't matter. Go back and watch that thing. So Indy Left says, who is the CEO of the DNC? That is a really good question, right? We have a leader, somebody that you know who gets prodded out there as the head of the DNC. They're not the person on that paperwork. So that's something that you can look up on a federal level. And the database that you want on that is called EDGAR, EDGAR. That is the database for all corporate filings. So that's the one you want to look at for the RNC and the DNC. Who are the leaders? Who's the CFO? Who's actually filing it? And oh, by the way, under Sarbanes-Oxley, who should be going to jail? So there's that. Okay, so Mike Teller says we can't hear Andy, and then Indy Left says Andy said his computer got sick. So it's kind of a mixed bag. But all right, so since Andy's sort of hobbled here, this would be a perfect opportunity for me to just go on an epic rant that would make him cringe, but I'm not gonna. Yeah, he's saying he's gonna end the streams now. So let's do that. Everybody, I really appreciate you tuning in. And here's what I would suggest you do. I posted the link to the U.S. Solutions Summit. It's long, it's 5 hours, but there are different segments. So go and look at it. And then we're going to have Dr. Fidel Kaboub back on to talk about income inequality and this whole jobs mess and how we've messed it up for corporations. But I do want to take some time, push back. Where was I wrong? Where was I wrong? Do be sure to watch Andy's segments where he was a host and tell him how fabulous he did, because he needs to do more of it. So yeah, Mike is like, Andy's away now. Now's the time to do the things. Like, it's so tempting. Okay, so Indy Left says, we're going to cut it up this week so people can consume it better. It's small bite size. Yeah, so do that. Go out and watch it. What do you think? The whole idea was to provoke this conversation, provoke thought. Do you agree? Do you not agree? And I'm so looking forward to more of that as time goes on. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in. And on behalf of Andy, maybe you can hear, maybe you can't, thank you so much for joining in. And we will see you bright and early, 10 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday. Have a good day.
We bout that, ayy. Bringing the song, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Habit the dog.